Here you say, okay, here's based on how much we've saved, here's what we're going to lower the rates to. You see what I'm saying?
I do, but I guess I just assumed we were going to do that anyway. I guess I assumed that over time, if we were to charge by volume and we were to charge a flat rate per can, and as in per can size, and I guess that would increase with different numbers of cans. That over time the actual size of those rates in any given year would be calculated based on the actual cost of operating expenses, and would have the potential to go down if operating expenses go down. There's two sides to that coin, of course, which is that if for some reason operating expenses increase, the rates would have to go up. Like if fuel prices double, for example, if operating expenses do go up and we're using the fees to cover the cost of collection, then the fees will go up. But if it works the way we want it to and operating expenses go down, all things being equal in terms of energy rates and everything, then I assume that the savings would still be passed along to the customer in time. That would still function as an across-the-board increased burden on folks, though, unless we're offsetting that initial $1 million jump in burden unless we're directly offsetting that.
Right. I think that's, if I may, that is the point of the issue that I think that we're trying to tackle here, is that this commission's not interested in raising taxes. We're interested in making the solid waste system pay for itself. And as right now, like Commissioner Wilder has mentioned, a significant amount of the money that we use to supplement our solid waste collection system is pulled out of the general fund, which is collected from three primary tax revenues. And what we're trying to say is that as we create this pay-as-you-throw system, we're wanting to say, okay, right now say it's $1.6 million, our trash fee pulls in $600,000. We're wanting to offset what people are paying in their taxes. So we don't want to give a tax increase, but we're also at the same time trying to make it solvent. And I think that that's sort of what we've got to focus on here is what is the best way to target residential participants in the solid waste collection system to offset any tax increase from a pay-as-you-throw fee or variable rate system. Does that give some direction to the conversation?
I think that does clarify things a bit. Rob did have some specific questions in terms of who a credit would be issued to and how it would be issued. And we discussed this a little bit briefly in work sessions. I realize that some staff, and I definitely understand where they're coming from, would prefer that we bill actually the property owners instead of the folks who are specifically producing the garbage, just because it's a lot easier to collect those bills. That billing renters, that can be. It's like and this is true. People experience it with utilities, and it's your whole comment when you're billing renters. Sometimes they move, and sometimes it's hard to collect those checks. And I understand. I understand that concern. But it still seems to me that the only equitable way to do it is to actually bill the folks producing the garbage, and to actually issue the credit to the folks who are paying the bills.
If you're not paying property taxes, how can you get a credit?
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's why I think it might actually make more sense to issue. If we can be specific about, and this is maybe we can't do this, but we need to know. It would actually probably make more sense to issue the credit on income, because not everybody who pays the garbage. Let's say that folks who are producing trash are all billed for that garbage collection. Not everybody who pays a garbage fee pays property taxes, because we've got renters, etc. But just about everybody who pays a garbage fee does pay occupational taxes. If you're a landlord, you're getting occupational, and if you're a landlord, you pay occupational taxes on your rent. I mean, that's income. And if you're a renter and have income to pay rent, then you presumably,
in theory,
you in theory have income. If you're paying rent, you in theory have income. And so, if it would be possible to issue the credit to offset occupational taxes, then that could be one way to hit, one tax that everybody who produces the garbage fee passes. The catch with that, and this is something we need Rob to look into. Obviously, we could issue, and we've heard from Rob on this already, we could issue a tax credit or a tax break to to very specific property owners in terms of parameters. As in, we can make it clear that we're just giving a tax credit or a tax break to residential properties 4 units or less. Right, and that's currently the parameter for the garbage fee, those are the folks that the garbage fee is applied to. So we can be specific about exactly which property owners would get that property tax break, or exactly which properties would get that property tax break. The question is could we apply a tax credit to occupational taxes based on those same parameters that involve property, or do we have to be specific in some other way? I mean, the ultimate goal, and there's probably a few different ways to get here, but what we're talking about doing is identifying, or here's what I'm talking about doing, because we don't have full consensus on this, and we won't necessarily have full consensus on. It might take we need to discuss this stuff before we can get to even majority consensus. But what I would like to see, the parameters that I'm trying to get to are actually having the fee go to the folks who are putting out the trash, and have the tax credit go to those folks. And there's probably umpteen different ways to get there. But considering the fact that not all renters pay property taxes, then doing it by way of property taxes might be particularly challenging. If it would be possible to do it through occupational taxes, that might be more doable, but I just don't know. Please.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
First of all, if you were to do it by a difference in tax rates, you have to have a reasonable, valid distinction
Sure.
between the residents with up to 4 rental units versus the residents with 5 or more rental units. So we'd have to come up with a valid distinction that's not arbitrary and capricious, as the courts say. And we'd have to think long and hard about why there's a distinction there.
Can I interject a quick question? And I don't expect you to necessarily know the answer off the top of your head. But would being billed for garbage collection that doesn't strike me as a very arbitrary or capricious distinction. Is that a sufficient distinction?
That would not be a sufficient distinction. You would have to have some reason that a court can hang its hat on, saying, well, yes, a residential property with up to 4 rental units, it makes sense to treat them differently than a residential unit with 5 or more units. And just the fact that you charge them a bill would not be sufficient, in my opinion. Of course, the court would have to make that ultimate decision, but you would, if for instance, you could show that the amount of trash that's generated by a residence with 6 units in it produces 10 times as much trash as as a residential unit with a residential location with only 4 units does. I mean, you can make it based upon the amount of trash that's generated, but we would have to come up with some valid distinctions in the type of property.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that applies to adjusting rates, right?
That's right. That's not the tax credit.
Right, and
that's correct.
Maybe that's one thing we could go ahead and agree on. I mean, we would, because I think we said this. Would we prefer to see a tax credit as opposed to an adjustment in tax rates?
I think tax credit would be the best way to target what you're trying to get to. If you're trying to get to residential participants in the solid waste collection system, providing a tax credit is the best way to target those individual people, I think.
I think so too.
I agree.
And you would have that same issue with a tax credit, because people who have 5 units in their house are going to complain and say, well, why don't I get a tax credit? They have 4, we produce the same amount of trash, so we'll still have to come up with a distinction.
I got and this is from the federal government a while ago, and I realized different rules apply, but I assume some of the parameters are similar at least. I got a tax credit, Jesse and I did a couple of 2 or 3 years ago for getting a high efficiency washing machine, just for purchasing a high efficiency washing machine. So, it was based very specifically on something that we paid for, and we got a tax credit for doing that. So it seems like that's not too different from paying for garbage collection and getting a tax credit for doing that.
I'll definitely look into it. I'm just concerned that you will have to come up with some type of distinction. But, I'll certainly look into that. With respect to the occupational or net profits fee or occupational license fee, I think that there would be a concern about doing that just because there are some people, a lot of people do work and have to pay that occupational license fee. Of course, people that live out of town don't pay an occupational license fee to Frankfort.
Or pay a garbage fee.
Well, they would pay if they work out of town.
Oh, they said
live
people
here.
Oh, right.
I'm sorry, I may
Sure,
have
sure.
misspoken, but
Yeah.
if they live in town and work
Yeah.
up in Lexington,
As
they
I'm
don't
an
pay.
example of that.
Yeah, good example. Although I guess that begs a question about a different distinction, which is, am I correct, because I could be wrong about this, but am I correct in understanding that tax credits don't need to be associated with a particular tax? When we got the tax credit for getting a high efficiency washer, for example, we didn't get a tax credit applied to our property taxes per se. That just kind of came out of our overall tax burden.
I think the key is what you said earlier. As closely as you can tie that, whatever you're going to call the credit, as closely as you can tie that to the individual,
Yeah.
gives them the incentive, gives them the individual incentive. And so the further you get away from tying that to an individual, you're losing your effectiveness.
That's dead on. So I guess there's probably a few different ways to get there, but I guess now you know what we're.
Right.
Does that clarify in terms of what we're shooting at?
Right. And I would say that when you got your tax credit, that was a credit against your income tax that you have to pay
Was specifically against income.
to the feds.
Right.
So,
Could we not call it a tax credit? Not a tax credit, a trash credit? Not use the word tax at all.
I guess I'm pretty open to the semantics of the whole thing. Although I guess I would like people to understand that this isn't, that the fee wouldn't be added on top of taxes already. I mean, because one of the other things I like about a credit, as opposed to just a rate reduction, is that folks actually are cognizant of the offset, or actually, can actually see how much money is being offset. But that's, in terms of what we call it, that's semantics. I'm pretty open to suggestion. Sure.
Is there any more? Okay, old business? Yeah. You wanted.
One other question related to that. For billing's sake and for staff's sake, however this works out with the billing process, possibly through the plant board, how would we keep track monthly of the additional costs for picking up limbs, couches, and yard waste? Would that be a separate stamp system to keep it out of our billing system, or would that have to be reported monthly by those who pick up the trash to some central point so that we could report that to the plant board so they could adjust their